The village of Mbale had always known peace. But one evening, the wind began to howl, a cry that shook the air and stirred unrest in the hearts of its people. It was no ordinary wind. It carried with it a haunting call, a message too important to ignore. The elders gathered, their eyes clouded with fear as they whispered of ancient omens and forgotten warnings. The wind, a force of nature, was now a bearer of doom. Mirembe stood at the forest's edge, her heart racing. The wind tugged at her hair, whispered against her skin, a voice only she could hear. The village healer had always been in tune with the land, but this was different. The wind, fierce and wild, beckoned her. It was as if the earth itself was calling out to her, urging her to discover its hidden truth. She knew the wind's message could no longer be ignored. In the village's sacred circle, the elders gathered under the great tree, their voices low and somber. One elder, aged beyond measure, spoke of a prophecy long hidden in the shadows of time. The wind's call was not random. It was a warning. The village will fall unless the secret it carries is uncovered, the elder intoned, his voice trembling. The people listened, their faces dark with the weight of the prophecy. Mirembe felt the burden settle on her shoulders as the wind howled, louder as though confirming the elder's words. As Mirembe set out to uncover the truth, she felt eyes on her, unseen but ever present. A danger lurked within her own village. There were those who had begun to whisper behind closed doors, fearing the prophecy would bring ruin to their power. Dark forces stirred among the villagers, intent on stopping her from revealing what the wind had to say. Mirembe moved cautiously, aware that each step she took was watched by those who did not wish for the truth to come to light. The tension in the village grew. Mirembe, once trusted by all, now found herself torn between allies and enemies. Whispers of betrayal spread like wildfire, and it became clear that not everyone in the village wanted the prophecy revealed. Some saw the wind's message as a curse that threatened their ambitions. Others, who had once stood by her side, began to question her. Mirembe felt the sting of betrayal in every glance. She had to move quickly, but whom could she trust? As Mirembe walked deeper into the forest, the wind's voice grew stronger. It roared in her ears, warning her of dangers she could not yet understand. "You cannot stop what is coming," the wind whispered. "The truth will tear you apart." Mirembe clenched her fists, the weight of the wind's words heavy on her heart. She had to uncover the secret, but at what cost? The wind seemed to threaten more than just the village. It spoke of her own destiny, of the sacrifices she might be forced to make. The deeper Mirembe ventured into the forest, the stranger the path became. The trees closed in around her, their ancient roots twisting like fingers, guiding her to a place she had never dared visit. There, hidden from the world, lay the truth of the wind's prophecy. But with each step, she felt herself pulled into a darkness she could not escape. The Yo forest, once familiar, now felt like an enemy. The deeper she went, the closer she came to the secret that could either save or destroy them all. A chill swept over her as the wind calmed. For a moment, there was silence. Then a whisper in the air, a clue left by the spirits. A stone, ancient and covered in moss, lay at her feet. She knelt and touched it, feeling the power pulse beneath her fingers. Symbols, old as time, were carved into its surface. The wind had led her here for a reason. The village's history, their connection to the spirits, was written in the stone. But the message was clear. The spirits were warning her. The village's destruction was inevitable unless she unlocked the full meaning of the symbols. Back in Mbale, the village was unraveling. Mirembe's quest had caused suspicion to spread like wildfire. Friends turned against her, and every word she spoke was met with skepticism. Some believed her actions were guided by the spirits. Others thought she was playing into the hands of dark forces. The village was divided. As whispers turned to arguments, the air grew thick with distrust. Mirembe's decision to continue her search for the truth was becoming more dangerous by the day. But she could not stop. She was the only one who could hear the wind's call, and the wind had promised to reveal the answers. The wind returned, louder than before, its message urgent. Mirembe stood frozen as the wind rattled the trees and howled in her ears. The time has come, it warned. An unseen force is gathering, and it will consume the village unless you act. Her heart pounded in her chest. The village was not just in danger from the prophecy. It was under threat from an enemy no one could see. The wind was the only messenger that knew of this dark force. Mirembe had to act fast, but the clock was ticking, and the villagers were already in turmoil. Standing at the edge of the forest, Mirembe faced a choice that would define the future of Mbale. Should she trust the guidance of her ancestors and reveal the truth of the prophecy, risking everything, or should she protect the village by keeping the secret hidden? The wind whispered once more, its voice softer, almost pleading. Mirembe closed her eyes, knowing that whatever decision she made, it would change everything. She had the power to save the village or to condemn it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the wind's voice grew faint. It was as though the spirit of the land was holding its breath, waiting for Mirembe's decision. The village waited, unaware of the choice she faced. With nightfall approaching, the wind spoke for the last time. The future lies in your hands. The truth will either bind you together or tear you apart. Mirembe stood still, the weight of the wind's final warning heavy on her soul. She knew the coming days would test the village in ways they could never imagine. The future of Mbale rested on her shoulders, and time was running out. The village had always whispered of Mirembe's unique gift, passed down through generations. Her grandmother, the spiritual guide, had taught her the sacred ways of healing. With each herb she gathered, each chant she uttered, Mirembe grew stronger in her understanding of the land's secrets. The earth spoke to her, as it had to her grandmother before her, and Mirembe listened. She was a bridge between the past and the present, a keeper of knowledge that could not be ignored. Akeno, a man of ambition, looked at the village through a different lens. His mind was set on modernizing the land, turning it into a place of power and progress. The old ways, the spiritual practices that Mirembe upheld, were obstacles to his dream. He believed that the land should be shaped by hands of metal and stone, not by ancient rituals. In his eyes, Mirembe's role was outdated, something to be swept away with the winds of change. He would have to remove the obstacles, if not by force, then by clever manipulation. As Akeno's influence in the village grew, tension simmered beneath the surface. He spoke of progress, of machines and new ways, while Mirembe carried the old ways like a heavy cloak. Each time he spoke of modernity, her heart sank. His disregard for the village's spiritual roots ignited something deep inside her. She could feel the conflict brewing, the battle between the future and the past, between power and wisdom. Akeno didn't know it yet, but the winds were shifting. There were forces far older than him at work. Strange things began to happen. Cattle, once strong and healthy, collapsed without reason. Crops withered despite the careful tending of the land. Mirembe knew these were no ordinary signs. They were messages. The elders spoke in hushed tones, fearing that something was wrong, but they couldn't say what. Mirembe, sensing the growing unease, listened to the wind more closely. It carried something dark, something that made her stomach tighten. The land was speaking, and she had to understand its warning before it was too late. Mirembe approached Nalongo, the village's leader, seeking answers. She had heard rumors of a prophecy, a truth hidden in the shadows. Nalongo's eyes were clouded, and when Mirembe asked, he seemed reluctant to speak. "The prophecy is not simple," he warned. "It's a path you must choose carefully, for the knowledge you seek will change everything." He gave her only fragments, enough to fuel her growing suspicion, but not enough to understand the full picture. The winds, the signs, and now the prophecy, it all seemed connected, yet the truth remained just beyond her grasp. The wind spoke to Mirembe in ways it never had before. She could hear it in the rustling leaves, feel it in the chill that ran through her bones. Nalongo had spoken of the wind's message, but he had not fully understood its meaning. The wind was more than a warning, it was a voice, an ancient spirit calling out to her. It urged her to take action, to uncover the truth before the land could no longer sustain the village. The message was clear. The prophecy was not just a story, it was a matter of life and death. Mirembe stood alone, the weight of her destiny pressing down on her. She could feel the eyes of her ancestors on her, their expectations heavy on her shoulders. She had always believed she was meant to heal, to protect, but now the stakes were higher. The village's future rested in her hands. She was torn between honoring her duty to the people and stepping into the unknown, a path filled with danger and uncertainty. The wind called again, louder this time, pushing her forward, reminding her that there was no turning back. With resolve in her heart, Mirembe made her decision. She would follow the wind's call, no matter where it led. The village depended on her, and the truth was out there waiting to be uncovered. Akeno's plans for modernization had no place in a village that had lived in harmony with the land for generations. Mirembe would confront whatever lay ahead, even if it meant risking everything. She took the first step, knowing that every move would shape the future of Mbale. Akeno's ambition grew more dangerous with each passing day. He pressed forward with his plans, ignoring the signs and the warnings. His desire for power clouded his judgment. He believed that he could control everything. His vision would reshape the village, and the old ways would be forgotten. But the deeper he dug, the closer he came to something he wasn't prepared to face. The spirits were restless, and they were not so easily ignored. Akeno's pursuit of control would soon lead him into a darkness he could not escape. Strange events escalated. The wind grew fiercer, the signs more urgent. Mirembe knew that the time for waiting was over. The village was on the brink of disaster, and only she could stop it. She had gathered the knowledge, but now it was time to act. The winds whispered of a great choice that would determine the village's fate. With each passing moment, the stakes grew higher. Akeno's blind pursuit of power and her search for the truth were on a collision course. She had to make her move before the village was lost to the forces at play. Mirembe uncovered the hidden truths that had been buried for generations. The village's ancient prophecies were not just warnings, they were instructions. The spirits had left messages for those who were brave enough to seek them out. These secrets spoke of a time when the balance of the land would be tested, and only those who understood the old ways could save it. Akeno's vision was incomplete, for he had no understanding of the spirit's guidance. Mirembe knew now that she was the one chosen to carry that wisdom into the future. The wind called to her once again, stronger than ever. It was time to follow the path to the source, the heart of the prophecy. Mirembe stepped forward, uncertain of what lay ahead, but knowing she had no other choice. The truth was waiting, and it would lead her into the unknown. Her journey would not be easy, but she was ready. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her responsibility, not just as a healer, but as the one who would protect the land and its people. She took a deep breath, and with the wind at her back, she began the journey that would change everything. The dreams were vivid, each night growing more intense. Mirembe saw the faces of her ancestors, their eyes filled with urgency. They spoke without words, their messages carried on the wind, urging her to find the hidden shrine deep within the forest. She woke each morning with a sense of unease, her heart pounding from the weight of their call. The wind whispered louder now, as though it had a life of its own, guiding her, warning her. She knew she had to follow it, but fear held her back. What dangers awaited her in that dark, untamed forest? The village meeting was fiery, the air thick with tension. Akeno stood at the center, mocking the very idea of spirits and prophecies. "You are all fools," he spat, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Ancient omens mean nothing in a world driven by progress. Mirembe's dreams are just that, dreams. There is no shrine, no prophecy. The only truth is power." He laughed, dismissing Mirembe's quest as mere superstition. His words stung, but Mirembe's resolve only grew stronger. She would not let his mockery sway her. The spirits had called her, and she would answer. The argument between them escalated. Akeno's ambition burned like fire, while Mirembe's beliefs were unshakable, rooted in the earth itself. "You cannot ignore the wind's voice," Mirembe said, her voice steady but fierce. "The spirits are guiding me to something far, greater than your vision of control." Akeno sneered. "You still cling to these old ways, Mirembe. This village needs change, not superstition." The tension was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. The clash of beliefs was not just between two people. It was between two worlds, and only one could survive. Despite Akeno's dismissal, Mirembe knew what she had to do. The winds had spoken and the path was clear. She gathered Nalongo and Kato, the only ones she trusted, and set off toward the forest. "We must find the shrine," she said, determination in her eyes. Nalongo, her face unreadable, nodded, her silence a sign of agreement. Kato, young but loyal, clenched his fists. "I'm with you, Mirembe," he said, his voice filled with certainty. Together they ventured into the unknown, each step taking them further from the village and closer to the heart of the mystery. As they journeyed deeper into the forest, Nalongo's behavior became increasingly strange. She seemed to know more. Then she let on, her every step deliberate, as though she had walked this path before. Mirembe could sense that something was off, but she did not yet know what. Nalongo spoke little, offering cryptic advice and warnings. "The forest holds many secrets," she said one evening, her voice low. "Some are better left undisturbed." Mirembe's suspicion grew, but she did not question Nalongo yet. She needed her help until the moment came when she could trust no one but herself. Kato was a young tracker, his skills in the forest unmatched. He moved swiftly, his eyes keen, spotting signs others would miss. "There are signs of life here," he said, pointing to a patch of fresh footprints in the dirt. "We're not alone." Mirembe felt a surge of gratitude for him. Kato was loyal, unwavering in his support. Despite the dangers, he stood by her side, ready to face whatever came. The deeper they went, the more uncertain the journey became, but Kaito's presence gave her strength. He had no doubts about the path they had chosen. His loyalty was her anchor. The forest was full of strange signs. The wind whispered in a language Mirembe almost understood. The earth beneath her feet felt charged with energy. They passed twisted trees, with carvings etched into their bark, symbols she had seen in the old stories, but never truly understood. "This is a place of power," Nalongo murmured, almost to herself. Mirembe felt it too. The air was thick with something ancient, a force watching them, guiding them, or perhaps testing them. The The signs grew clearer as they moved forward. A broken branch, a feather from an unknown bird, the scent of something sweet and bitter all at once. The forest was alive and it was trying to tell them something. As they ventured deeper, Mirembe began to encounter figures in the forest. Some appeared briefly, offering cryptic words of encouragement. "The shrine is close, but beware of those who seek to stop you," one woman whispered, vanishing before Mirembe could ask her name. Others, dark and silent, lurked in the shadows, watching them with eyes full of malice. Mirembe couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following them, waiting for the right moment to strike. The forest was not just a place of mystery. It was a battleground, and they were caught in the middle of it. The forest grew darker, more oppressive, as if it were testing their resolve. The deeper they went, the more distorted the signs became. Strange shadows moved in the corners of Mirembe's vision, and the wind howled like a warning. "We are close," Mirembe said, her voice barely audible over the noise. Her heart pounded in her chest, and yet she felt a pull, a beckoning that grew stronger the further they went. But with each step, the dangers grew greater. The path became treacherous, and the forest seemed to resist them as though trying to keep them from reaching the truth. Akeno's influence was not limited to the village. As Mirembe pressed forward, she began to sense his presence even here in the forest. Hidden forces, loyal to Akeno, were working against her. The figures in the shadows were not just random wanderers. They were sent to stop her. She had no proof, but she knew. Akeno's power reached further than she had imagined. The prophecy, the shrine, it all threatened his vision for the village. He would stop at nothing to ensure that the old ways were erased, and Mirembe would have to face him sooner or later. At last Mirembe and her companions reached the shrine. It was a place of deep, ancient power, untouched by time. The wind howled around them, carrying the final message. The prophecy was not just about saving the village. It was about the survival of the very land itself. The spirits had warned them. And now Mirembe understood. But the revelation came at a cost. As the wind spoke, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and Mirembe realized that the shrine was not just a symbol. It was the heart of the forest. The truth was far darker than she had imagined, and the price of knowledge was steep. In the heart of the shrine, the truth was revealed, but it was not what Mirembe had expected. The betrayal came swiftly from an unexpected source. Nalongo, the one she had trusted, stepped forward, revealing her true allegiance. "I knew this would happen," she said, her voice cold. "The prophecy must be fulfilled, but not by you." The world spun around Mirembe as the betrayal cut deep. She had been blind to Nalongo's motives, but now the forest seemed to close in around her. The choices she had made were leading her into an inescapable trap. Now she had to decide. Who could she trust, and what would she sacrifice to save her people? The wind howled as Mirembe and her companions approached the shrine, its voice like a living thing urging them forward. The trees around them shook, and the earth beneath their feet trembled with an energy that felt ancient, unstoppable. With each step, the air thickened, the winds whipping faster, as if the forest itself was alive, eager for them to arrive. Mirembe felt the pull in her chest, a force that matched the urgency of the wind's call. She had come this far, and now, standing at the edge of the sacred ground, she felt a weight settle over her, a promise and a warning. Her heart pounded, but she did not falter. The shrine was here, and the truth was waiting to be uncovered. Her eyes met those of Nalongo and Kato. They too felt the wind's power, but neither spoke. They only nodded and stepped closer. The shrine was within reach. At the center of the shrine, a large stone tablet stood, its surface covered in carvings, too intricate to understand. Symbols twisted and turned, spiraling in patterns that spoke of a time long past. The wind circled the tablet, as though guiding their hands to it. Mirembe knelt before the tablet, her fingers brushing the surface. The symbols seemed to pulse under her touch, alive with energy, but their meaning was lost to her. "This is what the wind called us for," she said, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "This is the heart of the prophecy." Kato stepped forward, tracing one of the symbols. "But it is beyond us," he said. "No one knows this language anymore." Nalongo remained silent, her eyes studying the tablet. She did not speak, but her gaze was intent, focused on something unseen. The tablet held more than just symbols. It held the key to the power that had drawn them here. Just as they were about to examine the tablet further, a rustling from the trees caught their attention. From the shadows emerged Akeno, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "So you found it," he sneered. "I knew you would." Mirembe's heart sank. "You've been following us?" she demanded, her voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Always knew this shrine held power," Akeno said, stepping closer, his eyes locked on the artifact. "Power I intend to control. This village will bow to me. No more old ways, no more spirits. The future is mine to command." The wind howled, again more forcefully this time, as though warning them of the danger. Mirembe stood her ground, but her mind raced. Akeno had known of the shrine's power all along, and now he intended to claim it for himself. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Mirembe knew what had to be done, but the decision was not easy. The wind continued to press against her, pushing her to act. "We must destroy it," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of the choice. "To protect the village, we must stop him from using its power." Kato hesitated, his eyes on the tablet. "But destroying it could unleash something far worse. We don't know what will happen." Mirembe's eyes locked with his. "I can't let Akeno control this power. The village will fall if he does." Akeno laughed darkly, his hand outstretched toward the tablet. "You can't stop what's already been set in motion," he taunted. The wind picked up, swirling around them as if caught in the battle between their choices. Mirembe felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. The fate of the village, of everything she held dear, rested in her hands. Just as Mirembe prepared to take the final step, a voice rang out, familiar but unexpected. "You are too late, Mirembe," Nalongo said, stepping from the shadows. Her eyes glowed with a strange intensity, her posture now regal, almost otherworldly. "What are you doing?" Mirembe gasped. I've always been the shrine's protector," Nalongo interrupted, her voice cold. "The spirits sent me here long ago to guard its power. I will not let you destroy it. You do not understand its true purpose." Mirembe's heart shattered. The woman she had trusted was not who she seemed. Nalongo had never been on their side. She was the one who had led them into danger, who had let them believe they were doing the right thing. The air crackled with tension as Mirembe and Akeno faced off. Akeno's eyes burned with greed, while Mirembe's were filled with determination. Nalongo stood behind her, an immovable force, ready to protect the shrine at all costs. "You are nothing but a fool if you think you can control what is meant for the land," Mirembe said, her voice sharp and clear. Akeno's smirk faded, replaced with a sneer. "Then let's see who will be the fool when I claim the power that's rightfully mine." With a cry, Akeno lunged for the tablet, but Mirembe was faster. She reached out, her fingers grazing the stone. In that moment the wind howled, louder than ever before, and the ground beneath them shook. The battle was on. Mirembe fought with everything she had, her resolve stronger than any physical force. Akeno, desperate, tried to overpower her, but the wind fought back, swirling around them, pushing against Akeno's every move. Suddenly, with a flash of light, the wind stopped. The world fell silent. Mirembe's hands glowed with the energy of her ancestors. She closed her eyes and whispered words she had never known she could speak. The wind responded, lifting her in a swirl of power. "I know now," she said, her voice reverberating with ancient wisdom. "The wind is not a force of destruction. It is a messenger, a guide. It brings renewal, not chaos. It shows us the way forward. The wind, once feared as a harbinger of death, now revealed its true nature, a force of life, a guide to the future." The power of the shrine was not to be controlled, but embraced. The earth beneath their feet trembled as the spirits of the land answered Mirembe's call. The wind, once fierce and untamable, now moved gently, like a mother's hand guiding her child. It was not a destroyer, but a healer. "The village must return to its roots," Mirembe said, her voice strong. "We must listen to the wind, to the spirits, and find balance once more. The old ways have not failed us. We have strayed from them." The forest seemed to breathe with her words. The once oppressive atmosphere now light and full of hope. The wind had shown them the truth. It was time to restore harmony, to renew the connection with the land. Akeno, his dreams shattered, stood frozen. The truth of the shrine's power was too much for him to bear. His quest for control had led him astray. He had sought to dominate the land, but the land was not to be owned. It was to be revered. His once sharp gaze softened as the reality of his defeat settled in. His thirst for power had blinded him, and now there was nothing left but the ruins of his ambition. Mirembe stood tall, the wind now calm around her. The spirits had spoken, and the village was saved. The forces of destruction had been defeated, not by violence, but by understanding. She had shown the village that the true power lay in balance, in listening to the wind and embracing the wisdom of the ancestors. With the strength of the spirits and the guidance of the wind, Mirembe led her people into a new era where hope and restoration flourished. The village would thrive once more, united with the land, and the cycle of renewal would continue. The path back to the village was quiet, but Mirembe's thoughts were loud. She carried the weight of the shrine's secrets like a flame in her chest, fragile yet powerful. The wind no longer roared. Instead it whispered, gentle and guiding. As she approached the gates, she saw the villagers gathered, their faces marked with fear and confusion. "We feared you were lost," someone said, their voice trembling. Mirembe stepped forward, her gaze steady. "I am not lost. The shrine has spoken, and I have returned with its truth. The wind was never here to harm us. It came to guide us, to remind us who we are." Her words were met with murmurs, uncertainty clouding the faces before her. But Mirembe stood firm, her presence calm but commanding. "Listen, and you will understand. We have been blind to the balance that keeps this village alive. It is time to see clearly again." In the shadows, Akeno sat alone. His once proud shoulders now slumped, his eyes hollow. The villagers watched him from a distance, their judgment heavy in the air. "What have you to say for yourself?" one of the elders demanded, stepping forward. Akeno lifted his head slowly, his voice barely audible. "I sought to control what was never mine to own. The shrine's power. I thought it would make me strong, but it has only shown me my weakness." "Your greed nearly destroyed us all," the elders said, their voice stern. "I know," Akeno whispered, "and I will carry that shame for the rest of my days." Mirembe stepped forward, her gaze sharp. Shame is not enough. You must learn from this. If you seek redemption, then you must help rebuild what you tried to break. Akeno nodded, his head bowed low. I will do what I can. The village buzzed with quiet determination as the work began. The elders, once bound by tradition, now worked alongside the youth, their hands joining to mend roofs, plant seeds, and rebuild broken fences. Do you see now? Mirembe asked, as she helped a group of children replant a fallen tree. The land is not just ours to take from. We belong to it as much as it belongs to us. The children nodded, their small hands digging into the soil with newfound reverence. An elder approached, their face lined with both age and wisdom. You have given us much to think about, Mirembe. Perhaps it is time for the old ways to grow alongside the new. Mirembe smiled softly. The wind teaches us that nothing stays the same. Change is not to be feared. It is to be embraced. The village worked. Mirembe found herself drawn to the hill overlooking the fields. She closed her eyes and let the wind carry her thoughts. It was no longer fierce or wild, but soothing, like the touch of an old friend. True power is not in control, she said aloud, her voice carried by the breeze. It is in harmony, in knowing when to stand firm and when to bend, like the reeds by the river. She felt the presence of her ancestors, their wisdom flowing through her. They had always known this truth. She had simply needed to find it for herself. The land, the spirits, the people. We are all connected, she continued. To harm one is to harm all. To nurture one is to bring life to all. The days turned to weeks, and the village began to thrive once more. The fields grew, lush, the river flowed clear, and laughter returned to the air. The youth, inspired by Mirembe's words, took on roles of leadership, their voices carrying hope and determination. The elders gathered one evening, their faces lit by the fire's glow. We have learned much from our mistakes, one of them said, and from our children. It is time to weave their wisdom into our traditions. Mirembe stood before them, her heart full. The shrine has given us a gift, she said. Not power, but understanding. If we honor it, this village will never fall again. The wind stirred, gentle and warm, as if in agreement. The wind that once struck fear into their hearts now carried a song of renewal. It swept through the village, lifting leaves and scattering seeds, a reminder of the cycles of life and growth. Children ran through the fields, their laughter mingling with the rustling of the trees. The elders sat beneath the shade, telling stories of the shrine, of Mirembe's bravery, and of the lesson the wind had taught them all. Mirembe stood at the center of it all, watching as her people embraced the change. The wind wrapped around her like a promise, a symbol of all they had endured and all they had become. The wind has shown us the way, she said, her voice soft but strong. It is not the end, it is the beginning. And with that, the village of Mbale stepped into a new era, where the past and present walked hand in hand, and the winds carried hope into the future. The voices rose in debate as the villagers stood in a circle, each demanding their vision for the future. Arguments flared, the tension as sharp as a spear's edge. We need stronger rules, someone shouted. Only with strict control can we avoid chaos, another countered, their voice shaking with anger. Control is what brought us here. We need understanding, not force. Mirembe stepped forward, her expression calm yet firm. Leadership is not about holding the reins tightly. It is about guiding, listening, and learning from what we see and feel. A scoff came from the crowd. And what does that mean? Words will not rebuild the village. It means, she said, her voice steady, that we lead by example, by respecting the land and each other. A leader does not stand above, they walk beside, the murmurs quieted. For the first time in weeks, the villagers began to consider her words. The wind swept through the village, carrying the scent of rain and renewal. Once feared for its destruction, it now seemed lighter, as if urging the villagers to look ahead. An elder spoke as they worked together to rebuild. The wind was never our enemy. It came to show us what needed to be mended within and around us, a young voice called out, curious and hopeful. So the wind wasn't angry. Mirembe smiled, kneeling by the child. Not angry, only insistent. Change comes whether we want it or not. The wind teaches us to embrace it, to see it as an opportunity. The villagers nodded, their hands moving with renewed purpose. The wind danced among them, a gentle reminder that even in chaos, there is growth. The fields lay quiet, the soil, bare where crops once thrived. The elders and youth gathered around, each offering a plan. "We must plant more millet," one said. "It grows quickly and will feed us through the season." Another disagreed. "No, we should focus on cassava. It lasts longer and will sustain us better." Mirembe held up a hand, silencing the debate. "Have you asked the land what it needs?" Confusion rippled through the group. "The land cannot speak," someone muttered. "It speaks in its own way," Mirembe replied. She knelt, pressing her hands to the earth. The soil is dry. It thirsts for water before it can grow. If we listen, it will tell us what to do. The villagers exchanged glances, then nodded. They began to dig trenches for irrigation. Their movements synchronized as they learned to hear the land's silent voice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the elders gathered by the fire. Their voices rose in song, an old melody that spoke of the first villagers who had tamed the wild land. "Do you remember what they taught us?" One elder asked, their eyes scanning the group. "That the land is a gift, not a possession. We honor it, and it will honor us." Mirembe listened, quietly before speaking. Their wisdom was left to guide us, but we forgot. We thought we knew better, but their lessons were never meant to be discarded. Another elder nodded solemnly. "We must teach the children. They must know the stories, the traditions. Only then can the wisdom live on." Mirembe smiled. "And we must teach them to question, to seek new wisdom as well. The ancestors gave us roots, but we are the ones who must grow." The next storm came suddenly, dark clouds rolling in as lightning cracked across the sky. Fear rippled through the village, memories of past destruction surfacing. "We must prepare together," someone shouted. "If we work as one, we can weather this," another voice called out, hesitant. "But what if it's like before? What if we lose everything again?" Mirembe's voice rang clear above the rising panic. "Then we will rebuild as we always have, together. No storm can tear us apart if we stand as one." The villagers moved quickly, securing roofs, gathering supplies, and ensuring everyone was safe. The storm raged, but their unity held firm. When the skies cleared, they stood together, stronger for their shared effort. The village awoke to a brilliant sunrise, the light painting the land in shades of gold and green. The storm had left its mark, but the villagers stood ready, their spirits unbroken. Mirembe addressed them, her voice carrying over the crowd. "We have faced the storm, and we have faced ourselves. What we thought was weakness was only fear, and fear has no place where hope lives." An elder stepped forward, holding a small seed. "This seed is small, but within it lies a mighty tree. Just as within us lies the strength to grow, to thrive." The villagers cheered, their voices rising with the wind. They had learned to listen to the land, to the ancestors, and to each other. They had unlocked the strength that had always been within them. The wind carried their laughter and hope into the distance, a reminder that the greatest power comes from unity, understanding, and the courage to embrace the unknown.